Hey, welcome to Avidya Studios. Today we are covering Mercenary Enrollment, one of my favorite action webtoons. If you enjoy it, please hit like and subscribe. In an abandoned-looking, shady building on a deserted land, an injured, well-built Lieutenant Kangham Chan sits trapped, apologizing to a professor for failing the mission of trying to save him due to a betrayal by his colleague. Their door suddenly slams open and a sergeant is kicked inside the room by a scary armed guy. The infuriated lieutenant curses the guard, only for the guard to mock him in a foreign language, and slams his gun at his head. A moment later, the three hostages hear someone approaching, and the door slams open, only for the previous guard to appear again. The guard falls forward from an attack, revealing a strange, masked man who asks for the identity of Ham Chan and reveals he's there to rescue them. As they proceed to discreetly escape, an even more surprising revelation occurs to the three hostages. The guy came to rescue them all alone and managed to take down all of the people himself without any noise. The guy manages to help them escape in a very smooth and calculated manner without taking any shots, impressing the imprisoned soldiers, while slightly bruising their ego. The masked savior takes the lead and takes out multiple enemies with a couple silent pistol rounds. Ham Chan is very sure that the guy is some non-military Korean based on his tactics and movement. They exit the building and the masked man tells Ham Chan to hold for a minute, only for the lieutenant to notice that he kept the following prisoner's stamina into account. Ham Chan tries to identify if the masked man is Korean, but he just ignores him and continues to move out. They meet the rest of their rescued troop, which comes as another surprise for Ham Chan. The masked man then states that they will now separate as his request was fulfilled, which confirms Ham Chan's speculation that he was a mercenary. But before they could successfully escape, a mortar round explosion takes them all off guard. The survivors try to stabilize themselves, but our secret mercenary starts a counterattack even before they recover. Ham Chan is even more shocked when he finally sees that the guy who saved all of his trained soldiers was no older than a high school boy. Fast forward to 6 months ahead, a young girl is seen to be daydreaming in her classroom as she overhears her fellow classmates gossiping about a new hot transfer student. This makes the girl wonder if they could be talking of her older brother who recently returned. This came as a shock to her and her grandpa, as her brother was presumed dead in a plane crash that killed her parents 10 years ago. The girl's thoughts are suddenly interrupted when her name is shouted by an arrogant blonde girl, Heejin. Heejin and her friends start bullying Dayun like it's a usual occurrence for her, asking for her gym clothes. Dayun then protests, saying that she won't have anything to wear during PE. This only leads to a slap on the head and taunting by her bullies. Meanwhile, Heejin is introduced in his class when, like every cliché, high school politics, some classroom bullies feel triggered by Heejin getting attention. As Heejin walks over to his desk, one bully instigates a reaction by timing a leg trip. But Heejin, being such a fine mercenary, obviously doesn't fall for it. The bully is surprised that Heejin noticed the trick and starts to taunt him. What actually stops Heejin from having any reaction at all, other than a glare, is the fact that Lieutenant Ham Chan told him to be careful and discreet at school, and not to pick a fight with anyone. Ironically, Heejin gave this promise, provided that it would be an amateur move to do so without any prior knowledge about the people he'd be facing. While Ham Chan is just worried about the life of anyone Heejin ends up in a feud with. Heejin snaps back to reality and calmly apologizes as he continues to his seat. This gives the bullies confidence that it's another pathetic new kid. Heejin's seatmate introduces himself and briefs him about the usuals of his school, and how the two guys Jahyung, who just tried to trip him, and Hyukjin, who sits behind him, are nothing but trouble, so it's best to steer clear of them. Heejin listens to it all in an appreciative manner and observes his surroundings during the day. He enjoys the peace and quiet of the place in comparison to the battlefields he's lived in for the past 10 years. At the end of the day, Heejin is found waiting for Dayun at the front of school. He walks with Dayun back home, with the awkwardness being very tangible between the long-lost siblings. Heejin reminisces about their earlier childhood and how they barely knew each other, along with their grandfather, which explains the awkward silence. As they walk home, they pass by some students having food outside a convenience store. Dayun instantly recognizes them as her bullies, and they look up to notice her. The girl bully starts to tease her, and Dayun tries to explain to Heejin that it's just a friend. but the girl immediately retorts, causing Ijin to silently focus his attention on them. The bigger bully is ticked off by Ijin's staring and tells him to look away, but Ijin continues to analyze the situation, which makes the bully get up and come face to face with Ijin. Ijin instantly reads his body language and sees no threat, which is why he is confused at the bully's bravado. But remember his promise with the lieutenant, he chooses to leave the bully alone. This only enrages the bully more, and he is about to strike when Dayun suddenly steps in to explain away Ijin's behavior and apologizes in his place, only for the bully to ignore her and grip Ijin's shirt. Ijin looks over at his sister and notices her frightened face. Immediately, he tosses the bully's hand aside and walks over to Dayun. That's when he softly places his jacket on top of her head, asking her to stay still. She is still confused, but receives the jacket, as the bully suddenly lunges at Ijin, who swiftly smacks the guy to the floor, shocking the other two bullies. After beating a random guy on the street, Ijin sighs regretfully, as he recognizes that he just broke the promise he made with the lieutenant on his first day. Meanwhile, during a military training session, Ham-chan confidently talks about how he taught Ijin, and being affirmative that he would be well behaved back in high school. What he doesn't expect at all is for Ijin to be fighting some random bullies on a street for troubling his little sister. Ijin's first strike already made the first bully pass out, leaving the other two to stand up. Ijin then races to the second guy and throws a gut punch, which makes him fly across the street. The last bully stands in shock as she faces Ijin. His glare makes her start to sweat in fear when Dayun interrupts by calling out to Ijin. She looks over to see a scene of two unconscious bullies and a frozen girl in fear. Ijin walks back to Dayun with a total shift in his demeanor, as he casually asks her if she wants to go eat something, as if he didn't just finish a fight a few seconds ago. Dayun gives back Ijin's jacket as he softly says thanks, surprising the girl bully with his soft expression. Dayun timidly departs, as Ijin still sends a look toward the remaining girl bully, who is still frozen in place from shock. Dayun doesn't intrude much on how her brother managed to do this, other than just confirming if he did that. She feels nice as well as a tad bit guilty to hear he did it because she was being bothered. She is surprised, but appreciative for his reason as they walk home in silence. At home, Ijin's grandpa is stressing that he should be the one to cook, and that Ijin should be resting and enjoying the food. Ijin reassures him that he can help with the dishes and his grandpa should rest. Ijin praises the food that their grandpa cooked, which fills Dayun's heart with warmth, knowing her grandfather took cooking lessons just to prepare for his returning grandson. When the grandpa asks how their day went, Ijin looks to respond, but chooses to give a nice answer to not stress him out with the truth. Ijin dozes off peacefully in his bed, feeling whole at the thought of having a good family day. A terrifying flashback of the plane crash with his parents wakes him up in the morning, leaving him gasping for air as he tries to calm himself down. He hears rustling outside, so goes out to see his sister getting ready to leave, informing him that their grandpa already left for work and there's some preheated food from last night set on the table so he can have breakfast. Ijin silently takes all this in after Dayun leaves for school. At their school, the bully girl that survived last night's fight with Ijin briefs Heejin about what went down and is feeling a bit nervous to continue to pick on Dayun. But she reassures herself that it will be fine because Heejin's brother leads the most dominant group in the third year's class. Heejin seems unbothered as ever when she finds Dayun and smacks her head. She orders Dayun to follow and laughs when Dayun tries to respond. Dayun ends up following Heejin to a private area where she is beaten, and it's revealed that Heejin's brother is already on his way to mess with Ijin. Dayun immediately gets up after hearing this and rushes out. Meanwhile, before Ijin enters the class, his nice seatmate Young-chan is being bullied and aimed at with erasers by Hyukjin and Jaehyung. They continue to find erasers to fling and joke like it's a game with guns. This is halted by the presence of Ijin, who blocks one of the eraser bullets. He casually gets to his seat, annoying the two bullies. They plot to bully Ijin after the school day is over. Relieved by nice company, Yun-chan offers Ijin to show him around after school, but Ijin declines by revealing to Young-chan that Dayun is his sister and he wants to walk her home. This shocks Yun-chan, which makes Ijin question him. Yun-chan then briefs Ijin about the troubled school life of his younger sister. Like any other typical story, this cute girl has only been bullied so much by Heejin since Heejin's crush liked Dayun, so all this bullying started as a form of jealousy. But most bullies don't need a reason to be rude and pathetic. So Dayun's life gets messier as Heejin used her brother, Kisu's image, to rule school, and then coincidentally became classmates with her in high school, which made the bullying worse. Youngchan wonders how Dayun even manages to come to school with the amount of torture she faces, while Heejin also wonders how Dayun managed to keep a happy persona in front of her grandpa the whole time. Heejin pauses to digest all this information and thanks Youngchan for bringing it to his attention. The classroom door is kicked open as Kisu's group trudges in. Heejin's brother approaches Heejin, while everyone just gossips about Kim Kisu entering the classroom with his friends, who were previously beaten up by Heejin. Hyukjin and Jaehyung ask what Kisu is doing in their classroom, only for Kisu to dismiss them. Internally, the two classroom bullies are nervous, as they know they can't measure up to Kisu's henchmen who were taken out yesterday. Point out Heejin. Kim Kisu can't believe his friends were beaten up by someone as pathetic looking as Heejin. He calls out for Heejin, and as Heejin gets up, he asks if he is Kim Kisu. Heejin stays glaring at the bullies as Kim Kisu confirms and then orders his group to bring him over. Right then, Dayun bursts into the classroom, out of breath. Heejin looks up, only to then notice Dayun's bruised face and dirty clothing. Kisu casually throws an insult at Dayun, alongside mocking her for caring for her brother and joking about being jealous because his own sister would never do the same. As if on cue, Heejin appears there, adding more crowd and drama for the audience to watch. But this mockery game is cut short when Heejin takes in the appearance of a bruised Dayun with tears sliding down her face and her trembling voice apologizing to him for causing him trouble. Heejin just stands there with a death glare, then calmly tells Daeum that it's not her fault at all and she shouldn't blame herself. Right after he's done speaking, Heejin's first strike lands cleanly on the first bully, knocking him down and shocking the other bullies. The second one jumps in, only to be parried, and immediately countered by a throat strike. He falls to the floor, grasping his throat for breath, as the third bully throws a right hook which Heejin slips past. Heejin strikes his liver and sets up a leg sweep, leaving him on the ground. Everyone is left speechless. Even Kisu and Heejin look baffled at what unfolded right in front of them. Heejin then stands facing the arrogant evil siblings with a cold glare, asking if they are the ones who have been giving his sister a hard time. The classmates start to whisper, then Kisu smirks and demeans Heejin by just stating that he knows a few fighting tricks, but Heejin just stares at him unamused. This infuriates an already ego-bruised Kisu, who moves ahead with a swift kick to the face. Kisu expects a clean hit, only for Heejin to easily block it. This gives yet another shock to Kisu, who then tries kicking him the other way, only for it to be brushed aside and grabbed. Heejin decides to be done with the drama and punches Kisu right in the nose. Getting out a satisfying trickle of blood, Heejin stares him down for a second before giving Kisu a sharp head kick, knocking him out cold, which receives multiple gasps since nobody ever dared standing up against Kisu. Even Dayun stands there with wide eyes and a hand over mouth. Heejin then starts to walk over to the girls, as Heejin starts to panic, and is only stopped by Dayun pulling his arm. She's surprised to hear that all of this was just because he knows she was bullied, so she hurriedly changes her expressions to content, and tells him she's fine now and he should stop. Heejin notices her change but agrees to her offering to walk her to class unbothered by the audience that had gathered to see the Kisu humiliation show. She just jogs happily behind her tall brother, while an embarrassed and heavily humiliated Heejin looks at her beaten-up brother and his friends on the floor. Hyukjin and Jaehyung are relieved that they didn't try taking Heejin down because that would have backfired badly for them. While walking to her class, Dayun mentions how surprised she was with his fighting ability, and suddenly feels guilty as she apologizes to her brother, earning a questioning expression from him. She explains that he was dragged into 2 fights in a row just because of her. This confuses Heejin even more since he considers it obvious to protect her. Now Dayun passes him a bewildered expression as he explains with a lost expression that the place he's spent the past 10 years in, everyone has always been selfish. People would only think about themselves, but even the most selfish personalities had selfless moments whenever it came to their family. Heejin looks lost at his traumatic flashbacks of his missions and his old life, where he noticed that even on battlefields people used to have compassion for their families. So he adds that this is always why he wondered how it felt like to have a family, and what exactly a family means to everyone. Dayun listens to him with all her focus, but then looks down as she mentions that Ijin previously said he hardly remembered the two who are his family right now. He smiles in affirmative, but adds that it doesn't change the fact that they are a family. She hears him thoughtfully, but then comes back to reality, noticing the crowd that had gathered, so she panics and tells him she's fine now, so he can leave her be. Dayun mentions with a sweet smile that they have reached her classroom, so she'll go on ahead. She zooms into her classroom, as Ijin just smiles and walks back to his class, earning a series of hushed gossips about him being back and him being so cool. Even the two troublemaker guys of his class tried buttering him up, knowing they are no match against him. Ijin just sighs in exasperation at the responses, but gives a slight appreciative smile when Young-chan nervously calls what he did cool. Somewhere in a break room, the humiliated bully gang sits in embarrassment, wondering how the hell all of this happened, while Kisu slams his fist as he is in disbelief about the skill gap in their fight. A dumb, unbothered Heejin annoyingly mentions how they're overreacting, and it must be because they were caught off guard. Her dense remarks about trying to wave it off successfully manage to annoy Kisu, who tells her to shut up since she didn't face him like they did. The dramatic princess starts tearing up because of her brother shouting at her as if she was not just being stupid, and walks away in a mix of anger and humiliation. She walks to class and tries to lightly mock Dayun again about feeling jealous at the response of her brother and how she must be feeling special, only for Dayun to completely ignore her remarks. But this time, an annoyed Heejin's steps are held back at the recollection of the deadly glare of a certain big brother who can knock people out in seconds, but her ego convinces her that this isn't where she gives in. Dayun walks mindlessly out of school, wondering if her life can now be trouble-free. She has flashbacks of the constant bullying, only to be interrupted by Ijin calling out to her. Dayun asks why he was waiting, and Ijin responds saying he's bad at directions. A smirking Heejin observes the siblings happily walking off and plans on getting back on Dayun for all the stuff that went down. Back at home, Ijin's grandpa gives him the newest phone model, as he mentions many students use them these days, which makes the three very happy. His grandfather's affection for him is made clear by the effort it took him to put in his and Dayun's number into the phone by himself. After the sweet moment, Ijin lies down and texts Ham-chan to use this number and phone for contact in the future. Ham-chan's soldier wonders why Ijin has a new number when the lieutenant just got him one. Ham-chan confirms and is just funnily annoyed at how he bought Ijin the most expensive phone, and he changed it so casually, unaware of Ijin's emotional connection to the new phone. The next day, Dayun again rushes really early for school, but does not forget about setting the breakfast table up for her brother. On her way to school, she recalls how happy her grandpa was with her soup yesterday, and feels content when a sudden kick throws her to the ground. She's shocked to look up and see three masked girls who blame her for running into them, as if one of them didn't just literally kick her. Dayun immediately apologizes, only to get a slap in return. One of the girls then suggests going to the karaoke, and then addresses Dayun, asking her in a dangerous tone if she'll accompany them. Dayun's eyes go wide in fear at the realization that it was Heejin who pulled such a move. The three girls are seen leaving the karaoke tired, as if they had a lot of fun, while the manager just sighs in disappointment on how teenagers could scream that much while singing. That's when he comes across the disturbing sight of a brutally beaten up Dayun on the floor of the karaoke room. The manager tries calling for help, but she just denies and staggers down weakly back home. People are shocked at school to have the punctual Dayun on leave, while Heejin smirks as some form of sick victory and waves off her friends who are slightly worried about this getting them in trouble. But a mentally sick bully would never understand this, so she calls it some kind of punishment for Dayun for crossing some imaginary limits Heejin thinks she has. At the end of the day, Heejin waits for Dayun like usual at the gate for a long time, trying to contact her, but a hurt Dayun is her, rolled up in her blanket, and does not pick up his calls. Heejin then reaches home to notice that her shoes were already at home and tries to knock on her door. She just waves him off, telling him she's just unwell and not in a condition good enough to open her room door and let him in. Hearing about her fever, he feels a bit worried, so decides to go buy her some medicine. He's about to exit when he notices her shoes again, this time noticing specks of blood. His eyes go wide and dark at the realization. This leaves us at the end of part 1. If you would like to see how screwed Dayun's bullies are, please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment for me to make part 2.